All right, good evening, folks. How's it going out there on this Thursday night? It is 10:10 p.m. California time here, September 25th, 2025. All right, we've got a lot of 25s going on there. Latest activity here shows some movement out across the West Coast. The latest quake here on the globe shows a 3.2 earthquake, also 1.3 up in Alaska. The 3.2 is, well, it's hiding out here somewhere. I'm guessing down here in the cluster of quake. Well, there we go. I seen it up there, hiding out here across the Middle America region. All right, let's see what we got going on up here across the Bay Area of Northern California. One earthquake here in the last hour. There was a 2.8 earthquake here earlier this morning. Got to watch this area, folks, and I'm being honest here and sincere because of the potential here, all right, for large earthquake activity. It's been quite elevated across the Hayward Fault recently with a number of earthquakes there around the Berkeley area. Okay, Berkeley, a highly major populated area of the East Bay region here. A lot of everyone, right? Everyone from young people to old people to children out here that live and reside in the Berkeley area. And the Berkeley region is at hazard for at least a 7.0 earthquake, if not higher, here near term, okay? A 7.0 underneath this area would be quite damaging here, folks. This is a major community, so no matter where you live at in terms of your community, these are people out here. So we do have to be observant in terms of protecting those people, and we need to be on guard. The swarm that's occurred out here what do we got out there south of the area right now? Stand by for a second. Oh, that's the 1.4 that came in here earlier. But we do have to think about the amount of time that has passed out here for earthquake activity in terms of geologically speaking, right, since the last big earthquake, and compare that to where we're at right now in 2025. We're at 157 years. The average intervals here run between 140 and 150 years. So we are at the upper end here of the average intervals. So we could see a big time event happen out here across the Hayward Fault at any time. So when you see the events that struck out here in the last week, one has to wonder, well, are these foreshocks? I do believe we're getting close to seeing some big earthquake activity, but this is not the only area. I strictly believe here that we're going to see large events out here in California coming up near term in our history, in our lifetime, very soon. Because there's been so much time in terms of earthquake activity that has passed out here. The buildup of stress. The Hayward Fault's just one of them. The San Andreas Fault's next. That's overdue as well. The Cascadia subduction zone coming up on the overdue feature as well. So we are coming up to a time period here where we will see and experience large damaging earthquakes. And the question is, are you prepared? Are you really prepared? A lot of people sit out there on the opposite side of this microphone and listen to the data, but you really have to look around your surroundings here. Are you really prepared for what is coming out here? The most dangerous areas, obviously, along the plate boundary. There is numerous systems inland that we do have to worry about as well, and numerous systems out on the leading edge here of the Pacific plate that has potential as well. It boggles my mind the amount of potential areas that are overdue for big earthquake activity out here. We have been lucky. Seriously, we have been lucky. I experienced the 1989 earthquake there, the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was only a kid, but I felt the earthquake up here in Colusa County, north of Sacramento. Colusa County resides up here. There's Colusa along the Sacramento River. I was just a kid there in 1989, but I felt it. And I remember it very well because my mom had the wind chimes inside of the house for whatever reason. That I didn't ask her why, but the windows were open, the wind chimes were inside the house, but there was no wind blowing. And then all of a sudden, the wind chimes went off, and I'm sitting there playing, my Nintendo game at the time, and there was no wind blowing. So I remember feeling the rocking back and forth and the wind chimes moving, and then all of a sudden my dad came in from mowing the grass saying, "I'm feeling dizzy outside." I remember that very well. Oh man, my dad, God rest his soul. But yeah, 1989. That was that was only a 6.7 or 6.9 down here. That was well south of San Francisco as well. So a 7-pointer up here, I'd obviously feel much stronger, and the folks up here would experience more damaging. So we do have to watch areas, folks, that show elevated activity after an extended period of elevated seismic stress. It would be very foolish to ignore the Hayward Fault right now or any areas along the San Andreas Fault. That's why I strictly focus on these areas that have built up major strain, throughout time here. And during those time periods, man, humanity is built up, society is built up. But also we built up our thought process here that, everything's fine, there's stable ground. I walk 10 miles every day here on this concrete jungle, and there's never any earthquakes, but that's, come on, that's called complacency. There's an earthquake way out here, 2.1 near Ludlow, California. I like to pay attention to this chunk of land out here because of the strain that builds up here along the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate boundary. There's a massive shear zone here called the Garlock Fault shear zone that ruptured. Well, it didn't rupture, but north here ruptured back in 2019 when that someone said 6.9, and then later a 7.1 struck there back in 2019, July 4th, July 5th. That is a sign here of the increasing pressurization out here across the plate boundary and this chunk of land here, the Garlock Fault shear zone, and in between this area. And right now we do have a little bit of earthquake activity stirring up there with a 2.1. I wish we could just sit out here and tell, fairy tales all day about how life is just rainbows and unicorns and, nothing but happiness. But the fact of the matter is that we live along a plate boundary here across the West Coast, or no matter where you live out here on the planet, there's natural hazards and disasters that exist. And just because you have a beautiful house out there somewhere, or even a small house, doesn't matter, rich or poor, an earthquake is coming for you. And we got to be prepared out here. I do think things are getting very close. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a time traveler, but I do know that the amount of time that has passed out here is sufficient for a big earthquake, and very soon. Cascadia subduction zone, pretty quiet, but the amount of time that has passed up here is very sufficient for a big earthquake as well. Let's check out the tremor map out here. This is the slow SIP events. Interesting here. We got 289, but yesterday showed, well, okay, there we go. So, you guys remember when this is why I really wish I had access to the data out here, aside from just what they're putting out to the public data, the data to the public. Because yesterday, there was a drop, completely nothing, zero, nada, zip, coming in for the Cascadia slow slip events. But good thing I checked back there, because they included 363 events. Today's events shows 289. But why yesterday's was missing, I don't know. That's, unfortunately, I'm not in charge of that. If I had access to the data, then I'd be super happy. But I only have access to what you have out here in terms of the public knowledge and the public data. This is all from the PNSN network here. So 289, and the importance of this event here is the localized activity up there underneath Seattle and Washington. So as we're getting further slow slip events here across this area, strain is building up north here, or due west, upstream from the deeper areas of the Cascadia. So that does happen. Most of the activity here in the last couple of weeks has been here across Northern California, and we've seen it. Man, have we seen it. We've seen a number of earthquakes up there across the southern end of the Cascadia, all across the Cascadia fold and thrust belt, showing signs of extreme strain and stress. A lot going on out here across the Gorda Ridges as well. So that's why I'm a little bit worried here for the Cascadia subduction zone. All right, shooting north, one earthquake out there. Well, there's been a couple earthquakes. What is this? It's Mount Adams. What's going on out there at Mount Adams? We don't see too many earthquake activity out there. But look at that. They added that this morning. Well, it struck this morning, but they added this. I don't think it occurred in my update this morning. So this was sometime recent when they added this little 0.6 at Mount Adams. So, well, let's go investigate here real quick. Mount Adams, that little earthquake struck, looks like here. Look at the seismograph stations, a very limited area around Mount Adams that's monitored. Man, give me some monitoring stations, backpack, and a couple waters. Send me out there and I'll do this for free. I'm not even joking. And maybe some bear spray. But, how come we're not monitoring Mount Adams more? Why isn't it monitored more? Why is there not more seismograph stations out there? I'll do it for free. I'm not even joking. So USGS, if you're listening, let me know. The earthquake that struck out there this morning is a little 0.6, about 1 o'clock this morning or so. That's going to be, well, heck, if this is at 1 o'clock this morning, it's literally at 1:32, right there. Hello? Interesting there. What about some of these other earthquakes out there? It's odd how they figure out, what earthquakes to include out there, but I do believe Mount Adams needs to be monitored more. The Cascades out here, the Cascade volcanoes have shown an increasing amount of earthquake activity out here in the last couple of months. I've noted it. I've talked about it a lot. I'm not lying about it because anyone and everyone can access all of this data, right? It's not like I'm saying it's happening, and it's not. I'm saying it and proving that it's happening. The earthquake activity is showing up out here. This is Mount St. Helens here. A couple earthquakes noted there on the graph, and they did include one of those early this morning, a little 0.1. But anyway, kind of watching things out there. Let's see what else we got here across the area. Couple earthquakes down south there in the Baja California area as well. Been watching a pretty good hefty amount of earthquake activity work its way up South America, hitting Venezuela, and hitting the Mexico area here with the 5.7 earlier this morning. It's quite amplified, and I think we all can agree on that. Middle America, or the Caribbean plate, quite amplified as well. This region gets squeezed. It gets squeezed a lot there, and there's a 3.1 coming in there for now. But that activity does work its way up into the North American plate, so we do have to watch things out here. Oil fields getting hit, but nothing new. There's the Venezuela activity. 5.8 there. That's been in the last hour, but it looks like I need to adjust this here. There we go. So technically it's been more active than what we're seeing out here on the globe. So just be on guard, folks. A lot of activity stirring out there across those regions. Around the Vanuatu area, there's a 5.3 and a 4.6. New Zealand, quiet for now. Just, there's a lot of movement going on out here if you look globally here in the last 24 hours. But, this is just what is showing here on the USGS and the EMSC. Technically, if we were to include the Italy data, Africa data, India data, the globe would look chaotic. It would look probably like this. But, okay, so all this data on this globe, imagine all of this over here as well. The plate tectonics are always in motion out here. Even though it's not showing anything about across Africa, I guarantee you there's stuff popping up here every day. Very small quakes, but I don't want to overload the globe to where it looks something like this. Because really, I mean, what's going on? That's called plate tectonics out here. I'm more in tune on what's going on here in the last 24 hours and the sequence of events in those last 24 hours. And right now, oh man, all across this area is quite amplified. No major movement up north, but I do think we should watch that area. There's a 4.2 coming in right now across this area in the last hour. Not for sure where that's at, but it does. Looks like it's around this area here. Anyway, we'll continue to watch things. Kamchatka area up there around the coast of Russia, still seeing some earthquake activity. There's a 4.8, the latest quake. Pretty good cluster going on there. Still a little concerning that we could see some larger movement. The Hawaii area had a 3.6 earthquake earlier. This fairly shallow, south of the Kilauea volcano. So let's definitely get some interesting activity here recently because of the deeper movements underneath the area. Hello, there we go. That 3.6 there. Oh man, let's back out here a second and see what we got. Probably showed up here across this area, right? That's a 3.6. Showed up quite nicely there. That struck somewhat, about 4 or 5 miles underneath this area. It's going to be 14 kilometers south of Volcano, Hawaii. Not a big earthquake, but remember when the Pacific plate moves here, right? Let me show you the diagram. As the Pacific plate moves off to northwest, as we get this larger earthquake activity and adjustment taking place here, the hot spot there changes underneath this area, right? The big island of Hawaii is nothing but hot spots. Or it's Hawaiian chains there. It's the you can see it more so on this oceanic crust view. It forms throughout time here as the Pacific plate moves off to northwest. So this is going to go, it looks like in this fashion until something changes here with the direction of the Pacific plate. But as you can see, it's formed here throughout eons, and that's the old Hawaii Islands up there that used to be up there across the Aleutian Trench area. But the Aleutian Trench here obviously has been formed and deformed throughout time as well. But we're continuing to watch that form out here. So the Pacific plate moving to the northwest over that hot spot. Volcano activity will form ahead of that. So the Lohe Seamount down here, just one of the areas that will continue to build that land. All these have been built up and eroded and whatnot. But, yeah. All right, let's see here. See if there's anything else going on here. Pretty active. Man, I tell you what, there's just a lot of activity stirring up out here. Not so much across the Mediterranean or the Middle East. Pretty quiet out there for now. Let's see what we got here for the space weather activity. These are all offline for whatever reason. Again, it's been a lot of space weather activity offline for for some oddball reason. Looking at the magnetogram image, these are still offline, but the latest imagery, I guess, and it's really not all that latest. Well, it shows the 26 UTC time, so it's somewhat current. Nada. Zip zero. If I seen something, I would say, whoa, look at that. But there's really not all that much out here, folks. And this is very populated with sunspot numbers and sunspots in general, but none of these have the potential to really produce anything. You could have 100 of these out here, 100 sunspots on the Earth-facing side, and really nothing's going to go on unless you got that special spark, that special magnetic complexity out there. So there's not a whole lot going on. Just kind of watching maybe 4226, but everything else is weak out there. There's a couple other sunspots out there in the northeastern area of the sun, but really not. I mean, we'll have to wait to see what is in store with those sunspots, but pretty quiet out there. 30% chance for an M flare. X flare has been bumped up out of the blue for some reason. I don't know why. I think he messed up on that. That's a 1%. Should be a 1% chance or less because things have been degrading out here. No major roars there in the forecast for now, folks. So just kind of watching things out here. Far as tropical systems go, let's take a look at this here real quick. We're going to look out here across the southeastern area of the country. Now, there is the potential here of seeing some tropical systems coming up here in the days ahead. More likely that this system is going to form and hit the eastern portion of the country, not as a major hurricane, but that will produce a lot of sufficient rainfall activity there across the Carolinas region. You almost had that Fujiwara effect between the two tropical systems where they form and strengthen each other. One's heading inland, one's heading out to shore, but I don't see anything else after that. But there's definitely what looks like some sufficient rainfall coming in here to the area. We're talking about a lot of rainfall. Some of those up around 9-10 inches or so. We'll have to watch that and see how that develops. Little 0.8 there across the Palomar Observatory. Aside from that, keeping an eye on things here, folks. Seismograph stations out there look pretty quiet. Not seeing anything big firing up out there across the west coast for now, but it's stuck, right? If you really think about it, these plates are building up strain, or this plate area is building up strain and stress, and it's well strained. And I feel it's just a matter of time. All about time right now. We'll see you guys out here in the morning for the Friday morning update. Have a good one.